This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and well, we review a lot of phones with nice cameras. We review a lot of nice cameras as well, but what we don't talk about is how to take better photos. So here we have 5 photography tips to make your camera phone photos and your digital SLR photos better, or your point and shoot too. The same principles are going to apply to all of these, and that's why it's good to know these 5 universal tips to make every photo better. And for the first one, we're actually going to use the video camera, which happens to be a Sony a6000, shoots great stills and very good 1080p video, to illustrate using the video camera what I call the Icarus principle. Do not shoot into the sun. Do not backlight your subjects unless you're going for a special effect, like the sun setting behind the mountains or something like that. Otherwise, even with today's HDR modes that try to compensate and bring out the shadows and stuff, you're still just not going to have an ideal photo. Okay, now the sun is right behind me now. It's kind of high in the sun, but it's still backlighting. Notice how my usually, well, everywhere hair is kind of disappearing right now because the sun is, well, blotting it out. If you have your subject in a properly lit location without the backlighting, in fact, front lighting is flattering and can make them squint like you've seen me do, but front lighting illuminates the face much better and any other object you're taking. So let's just walk right over here into the shade and see how the exposure changes. Aha, right, much better. So there it is. Don't backlight your subjects, boys and girls. The next is what I lovingly call the rugrat principle. Okay, we call little kids rugrats for a reason. They are down on the rug. The same thing goes for your pets. If you're taking pictures of your pets or your little kids, get down on their level. There's flip-out viewfinders for a reason. They're on cameras these days, folks. Or if you've got a nice big old smartphone with a big display, you can hold it down and still see what you're taking a picture of. Don't wear your best clothes if you're hoping to take pictures of your kids and pets. And I'll show you the difference right now. And also there's the clutter principle. Humans make adult human-sized things. Therefore, little children, pets, look awful small in the midst of all the human man-made clutter, so avoid that. Zoom in on your subject whenever you can. Take a look at these photos, you'll see what I mean. Next thing, and this is a big one for camera phones, folks, particularly because camera phones all have wide-angle lenses. You've probably noticed that with some of these really super wide-angle front cameras now for selfies. What happens when you shoot at wide angle? I mean like 24 millimeter, which is about where a lot of your camera phones are. Or even on your zoom, that's probably the wider end of zoom. Worse yet, 16. We'll show you what happens at 16. It's not that I want to make myself look ugly here, but I'm going to show you what happens if you take a picture, a portrait of me, at 16 millimeter wide angle. Don't do that. There's a reason why most portrait lenses that are sold for digital SLR cameras are 90 millimeter if it's full frame. That would be the ideal right there. Different sensor sizes change that. 50 millimeters okay, or 60 millimeters as well. You want to go at least 50 millimeters and step back away from your subject. If you're using a camera phone, you're going to have to do that, particularly just step away. You can always crop afterwards if you need to. So I'll show you what I mean now. The next thing is wildlife photography. We're going to focus a little more on digital SLRs here, but if you have anything with a zoom lens, zoom to the maximum. You want to catch that bird over there? Then that's great. You can catch that bird. There might be stuff around the bird, unless you have a super duper long telephoto lens. That's okay. Crop it afterwards. It's amazing. You know, you might start taking that shot and say, oh, God, you can barely see that bird. Don't worry about that. Go for it. Take your best shot. Crop afterwards. That's why high pixel density sensors are so important these days. The megapixels do matter when it comes to cropping. Now, if you're back to using a phone, it's a lot harder, okay? Because we're talking, once again, very wide angle lens here. You can't telephoto in. You don't really want to use a digital zoom. Unless you have a super high megapixel phone, then you can get away with it. Some of the Nokia Lumia phones are particularly good for that. You can crop and still get a good picture. So, avoid digital zoom. Hope for the best. Camera phones, they're not just really made for wildlife, unless you get something like a Lumia. One thing you can do, whether you're using a camera phone or you're using a digital SLR or a point and shoot, is, again, it's the rugrat principle once more. If you're shooting something like bunny rabbits, obviously this won't apply to birds, unless you're going to climb on the roof of your house. But if you're shooting something like bunny rabbits or that cute squirrel or something, get down to their level. They look much better. Obviously, when you're shooting on their level and you don't have a top down of, well, look, it's the top of the rabbit's head. Who cares? Lastly, there's composition. This is really the very most important thing when you take a picture. You'd be surprised how anything can look interesting if you take it with the right composition. There's something called the rule of thirds. You divide the right here, imagine dividing lines, and right here. And you should try to get your object right here and have lines coming at it. But throw it away, okay, to a certain extent, because there are a lot of times when that doesn't make sense. If you're doing a portrait of somebody, you usually want them in the center of the portrait. Even if you're taking a picture of a pretty outdoor sculpture or your pet, that sort of thing, you're going to want them probably in the center of the frame. But if you're doing something architectural, and I'm going to show you the difference between, wow, what a boring picture of the new supermarket that we have in town, versus one where I'm using the lines. It's all about making movement happen. You either want, it could be a center point, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be the rule of thirds where it's off in one corner, but you want lines moving to bring you into the subject, and you'll have a much more interesting picture versus, wow, all my pictures just look like a flat landscape and nothing else is going on. So think about having movement, all those converging points, whether it's the corner, whether it's the center, whether it's even up here in the top corner. It doesn't matter. As long as all the lines in the picture are moving, you're going to have a nice shot. And that goes along with, what are you taking a picture of? Say, I just saw they put new lamps in at the parking lot of the supermarket, and they're really cool looking, right? So you take a picture, there it is. You've got the stores in the background, you've got stuff you didn't want. The lamps are not showing up. So don't be afraid to take a picture that might seem a little weird or artsy, because artsy is, well, artsy. It is pretty. If you want to get something more pretty and interesting, really bring that subject into focus, like you'll see our before and after of the lamp picture too. So there are 5 tips that are going to help you with your photography, whether you've got a really killer full-frame digital SLR, a smartphone, maybe even a really nice Lumia, something in between, maybe one of the Sony RX10 or RX100, say Mark III, Mark I, Mark II, any of those models, or any decent point and shoot. These principles will all work for you, and you'll take better pictures. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button.